Tenants and advocates are upset after corporate landlords continued to file evictions during the eviction moratorium, but nothing they did is illegal. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fact that corporate landlords continued to file evictions during the eviction moratorium. Now, as everyone knows, at least everyone here in the U.S., during March of 2020, all the way until I believe it was August of 2021, there was a CDC eviction moratorium put in place throughout the entire country. Okay, so landlords were not able to evict tenants, but these corporate landlords, these big, huge landlords, some of them are, I believe they might all even be REITs that are on the stock market that you can buy shares of, right? They continue to file evictions. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them one bit. If there was anything that they could do to get these bad tenants out of their units and get ones that were paying into them, then they were doing it. Anything within the law. And I don't believe for 1 second that these landlords were trying to operate outside of the law. So I think this whole scandal is a bunch of garbage. I don't think it's a real thing. Now, I have to admit, I am biased because one of these big corporate landlords, Invitation Homes, I actually am an investor in, okay? So I own some of this REIT's stock, right? So I own about $1,000 worth of Invitation Homes stock, and I get paid dividends from them regularly. And they are a large single-family home investor throughout the country. So I want them to do well. I want them to be, trying to get as much rent as possible for their units. And I don't have any issues with what they are doing. I own my own real estate on top of that, right? But I understand completely why these landlords were going through trying to, get these bad tenants out of their units. So let's see here. The article, man, it's not really, that these landlords were doing anything illegal, but they were saying it's immoral. It's just not right that they were doing this sort of thing. Well, I have to ask why. Why is it okay that a landlord has to pay for the rent so that this person over here can live for free with no guarantee of rental assistance, no guarantee that we'll ever get any of that money back? Okay, isn't that immoral that the tenant is living in a place for, without paying rent? I mean, I personally think that's stealing. Okay, I think that a tenant should be obligated to pay the debts that they are owed or that they owe, okay? And that the landlord is, they should be able to collect the debts that they are owed. And anything other than that, government interference, etc., for so-called once-in-a-lifetime events such as this pandemic, well, they should have never changed the laws in the first place. And as you know, the Supreme Court found that was unconstitutional and threw that garbage out. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I've asked questions about these corporate landlords before on my videos, and a lot of the small landlords here, they don't like the corporate landlords, okay? They still think of them as evil, right? But the way I see it, I see it a little bit differently. I see it as, hey, anything that affects these corporate landlords, they're going to push those same laws against you as a small landlord. So they're like, oh, we're going to get Invitation Homes. Yeah, they own, tens of thousands of rental units, right? And so we're going to pass this law that targets them. Well, when they pass that law to target Invitation Homes or any of these other corporate landlords, that same law comes all the way down and it screws over the small landlord who is renting a spare bedroom in his house, or the small landlord who is renting his one single family rental that he owns. So you realize that, hey, if they are going on an attack after landlords, they're coming after us all. They're not just saying, hey, we're just going after the big guys. They're coming after us all. Anyway, this article is coming from therealdeal.com, and it says, 4 corporate landlords used abusive tactics in pandemic evictions, House committee. And I guess the House of Representatives up in Washington D.C. They created a committee to figure out what was going on with evictions during this whole eviction moratorium nonsense, right? And so obviously they're just pandering for votes at this point. There's nothing they can do about any of it, and nothing that these large corporate landlords was doing was illegal. At least I don't think it was. But let's get into the article and see what it says. 4 corporate landlords were willing to go to extreme lengths to move against delinquent tenants despite the CDC's eviction moratorium, according to an investigation by a House subcommittee. Pretium Partners, Invitation Homes, Ventron Management, and the Siegel Group filed close to 15,000 evictions during the first 16 months of the moratorium, according to a report by the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis. The figure, identified by the investigation, is almost triple the amount lawmakers previously suspected. While the abusive eviction practices documented in this report would be condemnable under any circumstances, they are unconscionable during a once-in-a-century economic and public health crisis, said Subcommittee Chair Representative James Clyburn of South Carolina. Well, I disagree, okay? You said that they filed the evictions. You didn't say that all of these evictions were granted. So here is a good example, okay? What a landlord does is, right, they might not actually be able to physically remove the tenant, but they need to file the paperwork immediately so that when the eviction process opens back up, the ball will already be rolling and they will be able to move through the process quickly. Okay, so these landlords, in many cases, if they were allowed to, were probably filing evictions during the eviction moratorium, though they couldn't actually remove the tenants. It makes sense, okay, but at the same time, they're being attacked for it, and it doesn't make any difference whatsoever that the law, that this thing was thrown out. They should have realized, hey, the whole eviction moratorium thing wasn't legal in the first place. And now we're going to go back and try to punish landlords for the things they were doing in the past, okay? Oh, man. The numbers are bigger than expected, but the alleged conduct of some landlords may be as shocking. According to the report, one Siegel executive directed employees to harass and lie to tenants, including having apartment managers in San Antonio call Child Protective Services on a tenant who owed rent. Despite federal moratoriums, these landlords moved quickly to file evictions, according to the investigation. More than 90% of Ventron's eviction filings came after only 1 month of missed rent. Ventron and Pretium filed many actions over as little as $500 of arrears. Well, how long do you think they're supposed to wait to file eviction, okay? The normal operating procedure is you file eviction as soon as possible because the process can take a long time. So they didn't change their process just because an eviction moratorium was coming around, okay? Only thing they did was, hey, we file these evictions. We can't necessarily evict these people, but the eviction has been filed. So when the eviction moratorium is over, we can get those people up out of our units. Now, the worst thing that they could have done is not filed the eviction and then waited until the whole eviction moratorium nonsense was over, not collecting rent that whole time. Because, just by filing, a lot of the times the tenants will just move on their own. And say, hey, we can't pay this rent. We won't be able to pay it. So we're just going to move on, let you have your unit back, and things will be good. And and then the landlord will say, well, we'll forget. We just won't pursue that debt that you owe us, and that's that. So it works out good for a tenant in that sort of situation because they don't accrue some massive debt. Now, yeah, is that a bad situation? Yeah, it's a bad situation for the tenant, right? But it's a horrible situation for the landlord if they have a tenant in their unit for 16 plus months not paying rent. And they have a very strict set of procedures they follow. So, like I said, in the places where you still can file eviction, even with the eviction moratorium going on, that is what these landlords were doing. Findings from the report were passed on to various agencies for a closer look. Invitation Homes and Siegel were referred to the Federal Trade Commission, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and Fannie Mae. Both companies didn't maintain complete eviction records. meaning the number of filings identified by the panel could be an undercount. The entire report was referred to both the FTC and CFPB. Invitation Home CEO Dallas Tanner said in a July 28th earnings call, the report didn't find anything unlawful about the company's conduct, Bloomberg reported. A Pretium spokesperson also brushed off the report in a statement to the outlet. So yeah, the CEO of the company saying, hey, nothing we did was unlawful. So I did a video about a way that, landlords could get tenants out of their units without having to go through the eviction process when they weren't paying. And basically, here in Omaha, Nebraska, all you had to do was just not renew the lease. Now, they might consider that an eviction. I don't consider it an eviction, but I consider it just not renewing the lease. So a tenant has a 1-year term. The tenant hasn't paid you rent in 3-4 months, right? And you just say, hey, I'm not renewing you. You've got to go. And there's nothing the tenant can do about it. So I don't know if that was the situation in some of these cases that they are recording here. All I know is that, hey, this whole eviction moratorium thing is nonsense. It should have never been put in place in the first place, right? And it took away property owners' rights. It took away our ability to make money, and it could have bankrupted many landlords, including these big landlords out there, okay? So just imagine if they are coming after these big landlords right now, how long before they start coming after the small ones? That's what I always wonder. They're like, hey, these guys were filing evictions during the eviction moratorium, right? Well, how long before they start coming after the person with one single family house and say, well, you filed an eviction during the eviction moratorium, so you are a dirtbag, and now the government is going to, fine you or cite you or whatever, and punish you for following the laws that were in place and doing nothing illegal. Well, that's why I say, man, we've got to stick together as landlords, okay? We can't say, well, the big landlords are screwing over everyone, so you screw them. No, we have to keep in mind that the punishments are equally distributed between big and small landlords.